Donald Trump visits the Southern Baptist Convention, and what he witnessed shocked America. Sunday, December 15th, 2025. First Baptist Church of Memphis, Tennessee. The morning sun pierced through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting rainbow shadows across the wooden pews. It was supposed to be just another Sunday. Families filed in, shaking off the December cold, their breath still visible in the crisp winter air. Children clutched their parents' hands. Veterans wore their service caps with quiet pride. This was America's heartland. Simple, faithful, real. Pastor James Mitchell stood at the pulpit, flipping through his sermon notes one last time. He'd been preaching at this church for 23 years. He knew every face, every story, every struggle in those pews. Today's message: when leaders meet their maker. A sermon about accountability, faith, and what it means to truly serve. The organ began its opening hymn. Voices rose in harmony. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. That's when it happened. The double doors at the back of the church burst open, not violently, but with purpose. A wall of dark suits materialized first. Secret Service, their earpieces crackling, eyes scanning every corner, every face. The singing stuttered, heads turned, confusion rippled through the congregation like a stone dropped in still water. And then he walked in, Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. No advance notice, no press pool, no fanfare, just him, wearing a navy suit and that unmistakable red tie, walking down the center aisle of a church in Memphis, Tennessee, like he belonged there. Jesus Christ, someone whispered in the back row. Half prayer, half shock. Pastor Mitchell's hands froze on his Bible. His prepared sermon suddenly felt very, very small. Trump didn't head for the front row reserved for dignitaries that never came. He didn't wave or point or flash that signature grin. He simply slid into a pew in the middle section, right next to a family. A man in a weathered army jacket, his wife in a floral dress that had seen too many Sundays, and their two kids who stared up at the president with mouths hanging open. The organ sputtered to a stop, complete silence. Every eye in that sanctuary locked onto one man. Pastor Mitchell cleared his throat, his voice cracking slightly. "Well, I suppose we have a guest this morning, folks." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "Mr. President, you're welcome here. In God's house, everyone is welcome." Trump nodded once, firm, respectful. Then he did something nobody expected. He bowed his head. In that moment, surrounded by farmers and factory workers, teachers and truck drivers, the most powerful man in the world looked like just another American seeking something bigger than himself. Pastor Mitchell took a deep breath, looked down at his sermon notes titled, "When Leaders Meet Their Maker," and then, in a split-second decision that would echo across the nation, he closed his notebook. "You know what?" the pastor said, his voice gaining strength. "I had a sermon prepared, but I think God has different plans today." The congregation leaned forward. Because when leaders walk into the house of the Lord, they don't come to be praised. They come to be reminded. They come to be challenged. They come to hear the truth. Trump lifted his head, eyes fixed on the pastor. "So, let me ask you all something." Pastor Mitchell's voice thundered now, filling every corner of that sacred space. What happens when the most powerful nation on earth forgets who gives that power? What happens when we chase wealth and forget our neighbor? What happens when we build walls instead of bridges? Not just physical walls, but walls in our hearts. The church was electric, silent, breathless. And in the middle pew, next to a struggling veteran's family, President Donald Trump sat absolutely still, listening to words that would change everything. Before I reveal the most impactful part of this story, I need you here with me. If you love Jesus and you're not afraid to stand for your faith, write Amen or I believe in the comments right now. And next to it, add the name of the city you're watching from. Let's create a powerful wave of faith and prayer, uniting voices from across America and around the world. Imagine thousands of people declaring together, "I believe," each one in a different place, but all with the same purpose: to glorify God's name. Every single comment becomes a seed of hope planted in the heart of someone who may need this message at this exact moment. When you comment, you're making a public declaration. I belong to God, and my faith is alive, real, and unshakable. Remember what Jesus said, "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven." So don't wait. Type Amen or I believe and add your city. Let's show the world that God's people are everywhere, united in faith, prayer, and victory. And if you felt something stirring in your heart just now, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Every action you take helps spread this chain of faith, carrying God's word to hearts that desperately need to hear His voice today. May the Lord bless you and your family and multiply everything you do for His kingdom. Now stay with me, because what comes next is going to touch your soul in a powerful way. Pastor James Mitchell gripped both sides of the pulpit, his knuckles white against the dark wood. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the December chill that seeped through the old church walls. He could feel the weight of every eye in that sanctuary, but more than that, he could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another Sunday, this was a reckoning. You see, the pastor continued, his voice rising and falling like the ancient hymns that had echoed through these walls for generations. The book of James tells us something powerful. Chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. It says, "Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" He paused, letting the words settle. An elderly woman in the third row whispered, "Amen," so quietly it was almost a breath. "Faith without works is dead." Pastor Mitchell's voice cracked like thunder. The sudden intensity made several people jump. "You hear me? Dead. It doesn't matter how many rallies you attend, how many flags you wave, how loud you shout about loving this country. If you walk past your suffering neighbor, if you ignore the widow, if you turn away from the stranger, your faith means nothing." Trump shifted in his seat, not uncomfortable, focused. His jaw was set, eyes locked on the pastor. The veteran sitting next to him, a man named Marcus Webb, glanced sideways at the president, then back at the pulpit. Marcus's wife, Sarah, clutched her purse tighter. Inside that purse was their final eviction notice. 3 days. That's all they had left. Pastor Mitchell stepped out from behind the pulpit, walking down the 3 wooden steps to stand level with his congregation. It was something he rarely did. It meant things were about to get personal. "Let me tell you a story," he said, his voice dropping to almost conversational tone, which somehow made it more powerful. "Last Tuesday, right here in Memphis, a man died. 53 years old, Army veteran, served 2 tours in Afghanistan. You know where he died? In his car, in a Walmart parking lot, because he had nowhere else to go. He died alone, in the cold, wrapped in a thin blanket in the richest country on God's green earth. The silence in the church was suffocating. A baby started to fuss, and the mother quickly soothed it, not wanting to miss a single word. His name was David Chen, Chinese-American, Purple Heart recipient, and you know what the saddest part is? 3 days before he died, he walked into a VA office asking for help. They told him the waiting list was 6 months long. 6 months! This man survived enemy fire in Kandahar, but he couldn't survive America's bureaucracy. Pastor Mitchell's eyes swept across the congregation, landing briefly on Trump, then continuing. "And we wonder why people are angry. We wonder why families are broken. We wonder why churches are emptying and why faith seems like just another commodity we consume on Sundays and forget by Monday morning." An older man in a Vietnam veteran's cap stood up in the back. Tears streamed down his weathered face. "Tell it, Pastor. Tell the truth." "Oh, I'm going to tell it, Brother William." Pastor Mitchell pointed toward the man. "Because somebody's got to. We've been whispering in committee meetings and prayer groups for too long. We've been being polite while Rome burns around us." He turned, and now he was facing Trump's section directly. Not confrontational, but unavoidable. "Mr. President," Pastor Mitchell said, his voice steady now, personal, "I'm going to speak to you the way I'd speak to any man sitting in these pews, with respect, but with truth, because that's what this pulpit demands of me." Trump nodded once. A silent invitation. "Go ahead. Sir, you've built towers that scrape the sky. You've made deals worth billions. You've sat in the Oval Office and commanded the most powerful military in human history. But let me ask you something, and I'm asking as a man of God, not as a Republican or Democrat or anything else political." The pastor's voice cracked with emotion. "When you lay your head down at night, when it's just you and your maker, when there are no cameras, no advisors, no polls, can you say that you've fed the hungry, truly fed them? Can you say you've clothed the naked, sheltered the homeless, visited the prisoner, comforted the widow?" Sarah Webb, sitting right next to Trump, let out an involuntary sob. Her husband Marcus put his arm around her, but he was crying too. Their 8-year-old daughter, Emma, looked up at her parents with wide, confused eyes. Trump noticed. Of course he noticed. The president turned his head slightly, seeing the tears, the pain, the reality sitting 6 inches away from him in a wooden pew. Pastor Mitchell saw it too. He pressed forward. "Matthew 25, he shouted, and the congregation recognized the building crescendo. This was the moment. Jesus said, and listen to this, because it's not my words, it's his. Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." The least of these, not the richest, not the most connected, not the ones who can give you something in return. The least. He was pacing now, back and forth across the front of the church, energy radiating from him like heat from a furnace. "And here's what breaks my heart." Pastor Mitchell's voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in. "We've got children in this city, right here in Memphis, going to bed hungry. We've got families living in their cars. We've got veterans like Marcus here." He gestured toward the veteran sitting next to Trump, and Marcus froze, suddenly exposed. "Who served this nation with honor, who came home with wounds you can see and wounds you can't, and we've left them to figure it out on their own. We thank them for their service with words, empty words, while they stand in food bank lines wondering if they'll make rent." Marcus Webb's face flushed red. His wife gripped his hand. Trump was looking directly at them now, really seeing them for the first time. "And we call ourselves a Christian nation." Pastor Mitchell's voice rose again. "We put in God we trust on our money, but do we trust him? Do we follow him? Or do we just use his name when it's convenient, when it scores political points, when it makes us feel good about ourselves?" An uncomfortable shuffling rippled through parts of the congregation. The pastor was stepping on toes now, everyone's toes. Jesus didn't say, "Love your neighbor if they vote like you." He didn't say, "Feed the hungry unless they're immigrants." He didn't say, "Care for the sick as long as they can afford it." He said, "Love, period. Feed, period. Care, period." Pastor Mitchell stopped pacing. He stood in the center aisle, right in front of Trump's pew. "Mr. President, you asked to come here today. Nobody invited you. Nobody staged this. You walked through those doors of your own free will. So I'm going to tell you what I believe God wants you to hear." The entire church held its breath. "You have power that kings and emperors could only dream of. You command armies, you sign laws, you shape the future, but power without compassion is tyranny. Strength without mercy is cruelty. Victory without justice is just another kind of defeat." Trump's expression was unreadable, but he hadn't looked away. Once, the prophet Micah asked, "What does the Lord require of you?" And the answer is simple, achingly simple. To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That's it. That's the whole ball game. Justice, mercy, humility. Pastor Mitchell's voice softened one final time, becoming almost tender. "Sir, I don't know what brought you here today. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was politics. Maybe it was something deeper that you can't quite name. But I believe, I have to believe, that God brought you here for a reason, not to condemn you, but to remind you, not to tear you down, but to build you up towards something greater than yourself." He extended his hand toward Trump, not for a handshake, but as a gesture of invitation. The question isn't whether you can help the suffering. You can. The question is, will you? Will you see the Marcus Webbs of this nation? Will you hear the cries of the Sarah Webbs? Will you look into the eyes of little Emma and promise her that her daddy's sacrifice meant something? Emma Webb, as if on cue, looked up at Trump with those wide, innocent eyes that see past politics and power straight into the soul. Pastor Mitchell walked back to his pulpit, gripping it once more. "We're going to sing one more hymn," he said quietly, "and then I'm going to pray. And in that prayer, I'm going to ask God to do what only He can do, to soften hard hearts, to open blind eyes, to turn policy into compassion and power into purpose." The organ began playing softly. "It is well with my soul." But nobody sang yet. They couldn't. The air was too thick with conviction, with challenge, with possibility. And in the middle pew, next to a family facing eviction, President Donald Trump sat with his head bowed, shoulders tense, wrestling with something the cameras would never capture and the polls would never measure. The hymn ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. It wasn't the comfortable silence of reverence. It was the charged silence of anticipation, like the moment before lightning strikes. Pastor Mitchell stood at the pulpit, preparing to close the service with prayer, when something unprecedented happened. President Donald Trump stood up, not to leave, not to make a grand exit surrounded by Secret Service. He stood slowly, deliberately, and turned toward the man sitting next to him. Marcus Webb, the veteran in the weathered army jacket with patches from the 101st Airborne, looked up in surprise, his red-rimmed eyes meeting the president's gaze. "Sir," Trump said quietly, his voice rough with emotion that few had ever heard from him, "what's your name?" The church collectively held its breath. This wasn't on any schedule. This wasn't planned. The Secret Service agents positioned along the walls tensed, hands instinctively moving toward their earpieces, but they didn't intervene. Something sacred was happening. Marcus," the veteran stammered, standing awkwardly, trying to straighten. His jacket that had seen better days. "Marcus Webb, sir, Sergeant U.S. Army, retired." Trump extended his hand. Not the politician's handshake. Firm, brief, photo-ready. This was different. He gripped Marcus's hand with both of his own and held it there, searching the man's face. "Sergeant Webb," Trump said, and there was weight in the title. Respect. Recognition. "How long did you serve?" 12 years, Mr. President. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq." Marcus's voice grew steadier as he spoke. The words he'd said 1,000 times, the summary of a life that couldn't be summarized. "Injured in Helmand Province, IED, lost 3 brothers that day." Sarah Webb, Marcus's wife, stood too, instinctively positioning herself beside her husband, like she'd done for 15 years. His anchor, his strength when the nightmares came, his reason for pushing through another day. She was 41, but looked older, the kind of aging that comes from carrying weight that never gets lighter. "And you, ma'am?" Trump turned to her, and the genuine interest in his voice caught her off guard. "Sarah Webb, sir. I'm nobody special, just a wife, a mother." Her voice cracked. "Trying to keep my family together." "Nobody special." Trump's eyebrows raised. "You're married to a hero. You've held down the fort while he was in harm's way. You've probably fought battles here at home that don't come with medals. That sounds pretty special to me." Sarah's composure shattered. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she covered her face with her hands. Their daughter, Emma, 8 years old, with pigtails and a sundress that was too thin for December, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, don't cry," Emma whispered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "The president said you're special." Trump knelt down, actually got down on one knee in that church pew, his expensive suit pressing against the worn wooden floor. He was eye level with Emma now, this child who had no concept of polling numbers or political theater, who only knew that her daddy had bad dreams and her mommy cried in the bathroom when she thought nobody could hear. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Trump asked gently. "Emma Louise Webb," she said with the formal precision of a child trying to be grown up. "I'm 8 3/4. 8 3/4. That's very specific." Trump smiled, and it wasn't the campaign smile. It was the grandfather smile, the one he saved for his own grandchildren. "That's a beautiful dress you're wearing." Emma looked down at her dress self-consciously. It was from Goodwill, 2 sizes too big, held at the waist with a belt that had been her mother's. "Thank you. Mommy says we have to look nice for church even when—" She stopped, glancing at her parents. "Even when what?" Trump prompted softly. "Even when we don't have a home anymore," Emma finished in a rush, and the words hung in the air like an accusation that couldn't be taken back. Marcus Webb closed his eyes, jaw clenched. The shame of it. Admitting their reality to the President of the United States in front of the whole congregation in the house of God. Sarah let out a choked sob and turned away. Trump stood slowly, his knees creaking slightly. He was 79 years old, but in that moment he looked every year of it. He turned to Marcus, and when he spoke, his voice cut through the church like a blade. "Tell me," Trump said. "Tell me everything. Mr. President, I don't think—" Marcus started, but Trump cut him off. "Not as president, as a man. Tell me." Something in Trump's eyes. Maybe it was the sermon still echoing in his mind. Maybe it was Emma's innocent honesty. Maybe it was the weight of Pastor Mitchell's words about the least of these broke through Marcus's defenses. "We're being evicted," Marcus said flatly, the words coming out like gravel. 3 days. We've been living in that apartment for 6 years, never missed rent once. But I got laid off from the factory 9 months ago. Tried to find work, but with my injuries." He gestured vaguely to his right leg, which didn't quite straighten all the way. "The VA disability check doesn't cover rent. Not in this economy, not anymore. We've been applying for assistance," Sarah added, her voice stronger now, defensive of her husband. "Every program, every charity, every church fund. But there are waiting lists. Everything has a waiting list. They tell us we're on the list. We're being processed. We're in the system. But the system doesn't care that we have a little girl who needs a roof over her head." Trump's face was unreadable, but his hands had balled into fists at his sides. "Where's your caseworker? Your VA representative?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Sir, with all due respect, I don't think you understand how the VA actually works for guys like me. I'm not an officer. I'm not politically connected. I'm just another file number. I've got an appointment scheduled for February to review my case. February. In 3 days we'll be in our car, but sure, they'll review my case in February. We've been staying in the church shelter 2 nights a week," Sarah said quietly. "Pastor Mitchell has been trying to help, but they're overwhelmed. Everyone's overwhelmed. Marcus applies to 15, 20 jobs a week. He's a good worker, Mr. President. He's skilled. He's honest. But every application asks about disabilities, and the moment he's honest about his injuries—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Trump turned to one of his Secret Service agents. "Get me a pen and paper, now." The agent hesitated for a fraction of a second. This wasn't protocol, but the look in Trump's eyes left no room for debate. He produced a small notepad and pen from his jacket. Trump turned back to Marcus. "What's your address? Phone number, full name and service number?" "Sir, I'm not asking for—" Marcus started, but Trump interrupted. "I'm not asking if you're asking. I'm asking for the information. Give it to me." Marcus rattled off the details, his voice mechanical, the numbers and addresses that defined his shrinking life. Trump wrote it all down in his distinctive, aggressive handwriting, all caps, thick strokes. "What about medical care?" Trump asked, still writing. "You mentioned injuries. Are you getting treatment?" "When I can afford the co-pays," Marcus said. "The VA covers some things, but not everything. Not the good pain medication. That's experimental, according to me. My plan, not the physical therapy I need. That's elective, so I manage. I deal with it." "You deal with it," Trump repeated, and there was something dangerous in his tone. A man who took shrapnel for his country deals with it because the physical therapy is elective. He turned to Sarah. "What about you? What do you need?" Sarah looked startled by the direct question. I need my husband to not hurt every time he stands up. I need my daughter to have a bedroom, not a back seat. I need to stop having panic attacks every time someone knocks on the door, because I think it's the sheriff with the final eviction notice. I need—" Her voice broke completely. "I need to believe that my husband's sacrifice meant something, that he didn't come home broken just so we could lose everything anyway. I need hope, Mr. President, just hope." The church had gone completely silent. Even Pastor Mitchell, who had planned to close the service, stood frozen, watching history unfold in real time. Emma, still standing between her parents, looked up at Trump with those devastating 8-year-old eyes and asked the question that would haunt him. "Are you going to help my daddy?" It was so simple, so direct. No political calculation, no ulterior motive, just a child asking the most powerful man in the world if he was going to do something about the most important person in her universe. Trump looked down at her, then at Marcus, then at Sarah. He saw the army jacket with its faded patches. He saw the purse clutched tight with the eviction notice inside. He saw the too big dress from Goodwill and the wedding ring on Sarah's finger that she'd probably tried to pawn but couldn't because it was worth more in memory than in gold. He saw the least of these. "Yes," Trump said, and it wasn't a campaign promise or a political statement. It was a vow, spoken in a church, before God and witnesses. "Yes, I'm going to help your daddy. I'm going to help your whole family." He turned to face the congregation, still holding the notepad with Marcus's information. "How many of you?" Trump's voice filled the church. "How many of you are in the same situation? Veterans who can't get care, families facing eviction, people who did everything right, who played by the rules, who served their country and the system failed them anyway." Slowly, hands began to rise. 1, then 3, then a dozen, then more. Over half the congregation. In this one church, in Memphis, Tennessee, over half. The people were drowning. Trump's jaw set in that familiar way, the look he got when he'd made a decision that couldn't be unmade. "Pastor Mitchell," Trump called out, "I need to use your pulpit." The pastor, still processing what he was witnessing, nodded and stepped aside. President Donald Trump walked to the front of First Baptist Church, climbed those 3 wooden steps, and stood where pastors had stood for over 100 years. He placed his hands on the pulpit, the same pulpit that had just been used to challenge him, convict him, strip away his defenses. He looked out at the congregation, at the faces of forgotten America, at the people who had slipped through the cracks of the greatest nation on earth, and then he made a promise that would shake the country to its foundation. Donald Trump stood at the pulpit of First Baptist Church, his hands gripping the worn wood where countless sermons had been delivered, where truth had been spoken to power for over a century. But this moment was different. The President of the United States wasn't here to give a political speech. He was here because something had broken open inside him, something that Pastor Mitchell's words had cracked, that Marcus Webb's story had shattered, that little Emma's question had blown wide open. The congregation sat in absolute stillness. Outside, the December sun had climbed higher, pouring through the stained glass windows in streams of red, blue, and gold. It painted Trump in colored light, like something out of a Renaissance painting, a king being transformed, a powerful man being humbled. "I need to tell you something," Trump began, his voice rough, unpolished, stripped of the usual bravado. "I've given thousands of speeches, rallies with tens of thousands of people, press conferences in the Rose Garden, addresses to Congress. But standing here, right now, in front of you, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to say." He paused, and for a moment it looked like he might step down, might retreat to the safety of his motorcade and the insulation of power. But then his eyes found Marcus Webb, still standing in that middle pew, and he pressed forward. "I've failed you," Trump said, and the words echoed through the sanctuary like a thunderclap. "Not just Marcus and Sarah and Emma, all of you, every veteran in this room who can't get a doctor's appointment, every family facing eviction, every parent working 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet, every person who did everything right and still ended up with nothing. I've failed you." A woman in the back gasped. This wasn't how presidents talked. They didn't admit failure. They spun it, reframed it, blamed it on the previous administration or Congress or the media. They didn't stand in a church and confess. "I ran on promises," Trump continued, his voice gaining strength. "I said I'd make America great again. I said I'd fight for the forgotten men and women, and I meant it. God knows I meant it. But somewhere, between the Oval Office and the real America, between the policy papers and the actual people, I lost sight of faces like Marcus's. I stopped seeing the Emmas. I got caught up in the numbers, the GDP, the stock market, the approval ratings, and I forgot about the one number that actually matters. He held up one finger. One family, one veteran, one child. Because if we can't save one, what's the point of saving the economy? If we can't help one struggling family, what does it matter if we're the most powerful nation on earth? Pastor Mitchell, standing to the side, felt tears rolling down his face. This was what he'd prayed for, what he'd hoped for when he'd delivered that sermon. Not political theater, but genuine transformation. Trump pulled out the notepad where he'd written Marcus's information. He held it up so the congregation could see. This right here, this is Marcus Webb's phone number, address, service record. But it's more than that. It's an indictment of a system that asks men to die for their country, but can't be bothered to help them live when they come home. A system that stamps, forms, and processes paperwork while families sleep in their cars. A system that I, as president, have allowed to continue. He slammed his hand on the pulpit, and the sharp crack made several people jump. Well, no more! His voice boomed with the force that had filled stadiums and commanded boardrooms. I am standing here today, in this church, before God and all of you as witnesses, and I am making a promise, not a political promise that disappears after the election, not a talking point that sounds good on TV. A real promise, a blood oath. Trump's face was flushed now, passionate, alive in a way that transcended politics. Effective immediately, and I will sign the executive order the moment I return to Washington. We are creating the Veterans Emergency Response Initiative, not another bureaucratic program, not another layer of paperwork, a direct intervention force. Any veteran facing homelessness, any veteran who can't get medical care, any veteran who has waited more than 7 days for critical assistance will have a hotline. A direct hotline to a team that will cut through every piece of red tape, bypass every waiting list, and get them help within 24 hours. The church erupted. People stood, some shouting, some crying, some simply stunned into disbelief. Could this be real? Could the president actually do this? Trump raised his hand, calling for silence. I'm not done. The congregation settled, but the energy remained electric. Marcus, stand up, Trump commanded. Marcus rose slowly, Sarah gripping his hand, Emma pressed against her father's leg. Marcus Webb served 12 years. He survived combat. He earned his place in this country with blood and sacrifice. And right now, he's 3 days away from living in his car with his wife and 8-year-old daughter. That ends today. Trump pulled out his phone, the most secure device in the world, connected to networks that ran the nation. And he dialed a number right there at the pulpit. The call connected, and Trump put it on speaker. "This is the president," he said curtly. "I need Secretary Morrison. Now." There was scrambling on the other end, voices, and then a man's voice came through. "Mr. President, sir, it's Sunday. I'm in the middle of—" "I don't care if you're in the middle of surgery, Jim. Listen to me very carefully. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, at First Baptist Church. I'm looking at Sergeant Marcus Webb, service number," he rattled off the number from his notes, "who is facing eviction in 3 days. I want full emergency VA housing assistance authorized within the hour. I want his disability claim expedited and processed by tomorrow morning. I want a full medical evaluation scheduled for Tuesday with the best doctors we have. Am I being clear? Sir, the process requires— The process is whatever I say it is." Trump's voice was steel. "I want this done, Jim. I want it done right, and I want it done now. And if there's any pushback, any bureaucratic nonsense, any paper pusher who wants to tell me about protocols, you tell them they can explain to me personally why a Purple Heart recipient is sleeping in his car. Are we understood?" "Yes, Mr. President, absolutely clear." "Good. I want confirmation in my inbox within 2 hours. And Jim, this is just the beginning. Start identifying every case like this, every veteran in crisis. We're going to fix this, one family at a time if we have to." Trump ended the call and looked at Marcus. You're not getting evicted. You're getting a home, a real one, and your daughter is going to have her own bedroom. Marcus Webb, this battle-hardened veteran who had faced enemy fire and watched brothers die, collapsed back into the pew and sobbed like a child. Sarah wrapped her arms around him, crying into his shoulder. Emma looked confused but happy, sensing that something important had just happened. But Trump wasn't finished. He turned back to the congregation. I'm also announcing the Faith and Family Protection Act. Every family in America facing eviction will have access to emergency assistance. Not loans they can't repay, not complicated applications that take months. Direct help. We're going to partner with churches like this one. Pastor Mitchell, I'm coming to you first to create a network of support that actually works. Because you know your communities. You know who needs help. You're not checking boxes on a form. You're looking people in the eye. Pastor Mitchell stepped forward, his voice shaking. Mr. President, that's a massive undertaking. The funding alone. I'll find the funding. Trump cut him off. We send billions overseas to countries that hate us. We fund programs that don't work and bureaucracies that don't care. We can find the money to help our own people. And if Congress fights me on it, I'll take it to the American people. I'll camp out in churches from coast to coast until every representative understands that this isn't optional. This is essential. He looked out at the congregation, at the faces of people who had been invisible for so long. Here's what else is going to happen. I'm calling an emergency session with my cabinet for tomorrow morning. We're going to go through every federal program, every department, every agency, and we're going to ask one question. Are we helping people like Marcus Webb, or are we helping ourselves? Are we serving the least of these, or are we serving the system? Trump's voice dropped, becoming almost conversational. You know what Marcus told me? He said he applies to 15, 20 jobs a week. Companies see his disability status, and suddenly they're going in a different direction. So here's my message to corporate America, and I know many of them supported my campaigns, donated to my causes. If you're discriminating against veterans because of service-connected injuries, you're going to lose every federal contract you have. Period. No warnings, no second chances. You want to do business with the United States government? You hire our heroes first. The applause was deafening now. People were on their feet, shouting, crying, praising God. This was beyond politics. This was justice, raw, unfiltered, immediate justice. Trump held up his hand again, and gradually the church quieted. One more thing, he said, and his voice carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. I want to address something that Pastor Mitchell said in his sermon. He asked me if I could say before God that I've fed the hungry, clothed the naked, visited the prisoner. And the honest answer is, not enough, not nearly enough. He gripped the pulpit tighter. So here's my final promise, and this one is personal. I'm donating my presidential salary, every penny of it for the rest of my term, to a fund specifically for struggling veteran families. And I'm challenging every billionaire, every CEO, every person of wealth and influence in this country to match me, not for tax breaks, not for publicity, because it's right. Trump looked directly at the camera phones that had inevitably come out, recording every word. America's watching this. Good. I want them to watch. I want every news network, every social media platform, every newspaper to share what happened here today. Not because it makes me look good. I don't care about that anymore. I care that Marcus Webb's story is not unique. I care that in every city, every town, every community across this nation, there are families hanging on by a thread, and I'm done pretending that policy papers and committee meetings are going to save them. He stepped out from behind the pulpit and walked down those 3 steps, returning to the level of the congregation. He walked straight to Marcus Webb's pew. "Stand up, Sergeant," Trump said quietly. Marcus stood, wiping his face, trying to compose himself. Trump extended his hand, but when Marcus reached for it, Trump pulled him into a full embrace, the kind of hug you give family, not constituents. Marcus, stunned, hugged back, and the 2 men stood there in the middle of First Baptist Church, the president and the veteran, both crying unashamedly, When they finally separated, Trump turned to Sarah and did something that would become the defining image of his presidency. He took off his tie, that signature red tie that had become synonymous with his brand, and he handed it to Emma. "This is for you, sweetheart," he said, kneeling down again. "So you remember that you asked the president if he was going to help your daddy, and the president said yes. You keep this, and if anyone ever tries to tell you that your daddy's service didn't matter, you show them this tie, and you tell them that the President of the United States made a promise to you in church, and I keep my promises." Emma took the tie with solemn reverence, holding it like it was made of glass. Trump stood and addressed the church one final time. "I came here today uninvited. I showed up because, honestly, I don't even know why. Maybe it was God, maybe it was instinct, maybe it was guilt, but I'm leaving here changed. This sermon, this family, this church, you've reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Power isn't about what you can take or what you can build or how many people chant your name at rallies. Real power is about what you give to people who can never repay you. Real strength is about lifting up those who've fallen. Real leadership is about serving the least of these." He paused, looking at Pastor Mitchell. "You asked me, Pastor, if I could say before God that I've fulfilled my duty. Today, I can't. But tomorrow I start making that right. And every day after that, I'm going to keep trying. Not perfectly. I'm human. I'll fail. I'll make mistakes. But I'll fail trying to do the right thing instead of succeeding at doing nothing." Trump turned to leave, Secret Service immediately forming a protective barrier around him. But before he reached the door, he stopped and turned back one final time. "One more thing, Marcus," he called out over the heads of the congregation. "You're coming to the White House, you and Sarah and Emma, next week. I want you there when I sign these executive orders. I want your face to be the one America remembers when we talk about why this matters. Will you come?" Marcus, still stunned, could only nod. "Good. Someone will call you tomorrow with the details. And Marcus, you won't be coming alone. I want this church, anyone who needs help, anyone who has a story like yours, I want you all there. We're going to fill the Rose Garden with the people who actually built this country, the people who defend it, the people who've been forgotten. And we're going to remind Washington who they work for." And with that, President Donald Trump walked out of First Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, climbed into his motorcade, and left behind a congregation that would never be the same. Epilogue. 2 hours later, the video footage had already gone viral. Cell phone recordings from a dozen different angles, all capturing the same incredible scene. The president crying at a church pulpit, embracing a struggling veteran, giving his tie to a little girl, making promises that sounded impossible. The media exploded. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of them interrupting regular programming with breaking news. President Trump's church visit stuns nation. Political analysts scrambled to make sense of it. Was it genuine? Was it calculated? Did it matter? But in Memphis, Tennessee, in a small apartment that Marcus and Sarah Webb had 3 more days to occupy, a phone rang. It was the VA. Their case had been escalated to critical priority status. Housing assistance approved. Disability claim processed and approved. Full benefits backdated 6 months. Medical appointments scheduled with a top neurologist and physical therapist at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Sarah Webb answered the call, listened in disbelief, and when she hung up, she turned to her husband. "He did it," she whispered. "He actually did it." Marcus sat on their worn couch, holding his daughter, who was clutching a red tie like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Sometimes," Marcus said quietly, "miracles happen in church." And in Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump sat in the Oval Office at 9:47 p.m. on a Sunday night, drafting executive orders by hand, making calls to cabinet secretaries, reshuffling budget priorities, and keeping a promise he'd made before God and witnesses. Because some promises are sacred. Some promises change everything. The end.